So I'm out taking a little 7 mile out, 7 mile back hike on the Ice Age Trail to a little dispersed camping area in the Montrose section. And I thought this might be a good time to do some reflection on the Appalachian Trail and experiences, equipment pros and cons, and maybe advice for future hikers. And so I'll start with general impressions. So it was a very different trail for me since I've hiked out west a lot. The infrastructure with the towns and the hostels and the shuttles and all the availability of food and such made it logistically a much easier trail than, say, the Pacific Crest Trail, or actually any of them that I've been on so far. So I would say logistically, it's probably the easiest trail to do, and for that reason might be a good one to start on. But you can't be deceived. While the beginning of the trail in Georgia and North Carolina can be mountainous, it's really good treadway for the most part. You can easily get up and down the mountains as long as you have trained appropriately, so you're not, deluding yourself that you're going to have some 2,000-3,000 foot climbs. But I think the most shocking thing for me, and I would pass this on to anybody who's going to try the trail, is there's this huge psychological thing that happens to you in New Hampshire especially. Vermont starts to get a little tougher, but New Hampshire, if you were a 20-mile-a-day person, expect to get 12s. Unless you're young, fit, and motivated to go to great lengths. But if you want to finish, you got to understand that section, New Hampshire, southern Maine, your mileage is going to be greatly reduced. The wear and tear is going to be higher, and going to be some pretty challenging portions. So prepare for that. Prepare for that, and don't let it get you down psychologically, because that's also usually when some weather hits. And taken all together between rain and your reduction in mileage, and it's a lot at once, and you can start to feel overwhelmed or feel like your ability as a hiker is reduced when your ability is not reduced. It's the terrain. Especially in the Wildcats, Carters, Bald Pate wasn't easy. It's a whole bunch of it that can be difficult. So keep that in mind, be prepared for it. And if I had to do it over again, I'd probably rest up a little before I went into that section. Take it slow, understand it slower. And the other thing I did at the end that I really feel was a good idea was taking it a little slower before the final summit on Katahdin, so that you're not tired, you're energized, you're excited, and you can take that challenging climb and descent in stride. Vulture. Now, how I approach the Appalachian Trail a little differently than, say, the Pacific Crest Trail, which is my first trail, and I pushed myself too hard there and didn't eat enough, and made some compromises. So on the Appalachian Trail, I made sure that I took more time off, ate more, and rested more. I think it made all the difference. So my advice is, if you're going to do one of these long trails, you're going to lose 20 pounds if you're a male. So prepare for that and try to limit that. Unless you're already heavy when you start, you really don't want to lose more than that. It took me back down to high school weight, and then I kind of stayed there. As long as I kept eating consistently and resting. Both those things you got to do. Otherwise, it'll just wear you down, and that affects your psychology, and pretty soon it's a big bundle of problems, not just not just a weight loss, but you start to get more aches and pains. You start to, your pack becomes uncomfortable, etc. So my advice is, allow yourself to be hiking fit and not hiking unwell. I can see that by the time I finished the trail, I had no aches and pains whatsoever. The only ones that were created were along the way were by falls and things like that, which I was able to recover from. So I also count myself very fortunate. Well, what did they say? When opportunity meets preparation, that's when you get good results. And I was very concerned with not getting injured, which made my descents very slow and made going over rocks a little more slow. And in general, I hiked more slowly than some other people. But with all the injuries around me, guy had 6 stitches in his knee, lady behind me on bald pate broke her ankle. There were a number of injuries that took people off trail. And one Triple Crowner I talked to there said that it was the trail that was the hardest on his body. So, of all of them. So, keep that in mind. Go a little slower. Enjoy it a little more. And don't feel like you got to rush. So as you're getting ready, don't set yourself up for a rush. Set yourself up for plenty of time to do it, or do it in sections. Just make sure that you're using the trail and the trail isn't using you, abusing you. Hello, little dude. Nice warm day for you. The other thing I want to mention is that in my preparation, I knew there'd be a lot of moisture and a lot of humidity, and tried to prepare for that. But you need to prepare for all kinds of it. If your stuff gets wet, it won't dry out. It's very seldom that you get a sunny spot to lay it out, especially once you get further north and you're in the hemlock forest. There's just really no sunny places. So drying parties are few and far between. And if the humidity's high, between the sweat and the moisture, there were times that I had water pouring out from inside the sleeves of my raincoat that was just my own personal sweat. And then there were other times I had to take a wet tent, walk all day in the rain, set it up in the rain again, try to get it dry enough to sleep in, and kind of do that for several days in a row. So you need to be prepared with equipment, flexibility, and attitude. The other thing I would say is make sure your tent has the ability to take the rain flies down close to the ground, because you'll get some really hard rain. And I had some nights that it just splashed in, and I couldn't stop it, even though my rain fly was reasonably pitched, and under normal conditions it would have been fine. So prepare for that. Prepare for being wet from inside and outside your clothes, inside and outside your tent, and don't let that get you down. I mean, one of the ways you handle that is making sure you get into hostels and dry out and shower, because there's some real health risks if you stay wet for too long. So the other thing is, make sure you have, I know people think it's a luxury item or whatever, but make sure you have clean, dry sleeping clothes that are kept in the waterproof area of your pack. Maybe an extra plastic protection. So if you've had a couple of soaking days in a row, at least when you get into your tent, you can strip down and put on something dry, because without that, it will be even more miserable. And do everything you can to keep your sleeping bag and other critical items, especially if they're made of down, dry. give a chance for the foot box to, if your foot box is damp, it rained all day, you can't get it dry, then make sure you sit in it for a while before you go to sleep and let your body heat work its way in there before it gets wet again. So another thing I want to talk about regarding the AT is you're going to have some pretty big weather swings, and you don't want to make harsh decisions on changing out equipment, because I ended up in all kinds of variation because you're changing altitude, but also there was a big heat wave where having sleep clothes really helps, because you can lay down in just a pair of shorts because it's really hot. Sometimes it's 80 or higher in the tent when you lay down, even in the evening. And then you can gradually add clothes as the night cools off to meet the comfort level you need. It's also a good reason to have a quilt rather than a sleeping bag, because you can zip it open flat, not one with an integrated or rather permanent toe box. Just be able to lay it on you like a blanket so that you can pull it off to the side when you need to and regulate your temperature better. But make sure you've got something warm enough, because it can, once you gain altitude, it can get cold and damp quick. So, and then make sure your layers are diverse enough. So I generally wear a sun hoodie of some kind, like I'm wearing now, a cap, and then I make sure I have both shorts and pants in case I need them. You can use your rain pants to do double duty, but sometimes those are pretty darn hot. I use a wind jacket, so the wind jacket and the pants help keep the bugs off, and then I don't need to constantly spray. And then you'll need rain gear. As you know, even the most expensive jackets wet out, and that's because they're breathable. So they're breathable as long as they're not wet, because once they're wet, then the pores close up and now you're sweating inside anyway. So I made sure and got a Sil Poly rain jacket from Lightheart Gear, which is impervious to water. That means it's impervious to water from both sides, but for me, I'd rather have a jacket that I'm going to sweat in when it's warm, rather than one I'm going to freeze in if it's cold, because it's also a warmth layer. And then I got the pack cover from Light Heart Gear that has the hood and cowl on it, and that helps so much because for a lot of the light rain on the AT, or if you're in the woods and it's just dripping vertically off the trees, that's plenty sufficient. So that, and make sure you change your shoes out. Like set a mileage and change them out no matter what, because they're breaking down. And I saw people trying to stretch out their shoes, you know, make them last another 150 miles. And there were some sad situations out there. In some cases, if they hadn't been young, you know, they might have done permanent damage, and some did anyway. So yeah, a tent, I would go double wall. If you're used to the West Coast and it's dry, you don't have as much a problem with condensation, but in a single wall tent on the AT, it's going to be constant. You're not going to escape it. There are many times you can't keep the vestibules open because it's raining and you really need some ventilation. So recommend that. So also in your preparation, make sure you get on some, you know, climbs. Steady climbing is good, but varied climbing is even better. And try to find a place that's where you get to practice rock scrambles or boulder climbs, because you need to get used to that in a pack. It's a completely different story in a pack than if you're just out on a day hike. You got a different center of balance, and you really need to know how to do that. Going down as well as going up. And much like driving, if there's a potential accident, don't be afraid to take the ditch. It's a lot better than hitting something. And the equivalent on the AT is, if you got a slick vertical, whether you're going up or down, go to the edges, grab the roots and trees, and take the safe way. You know, some of us want to see ourselves as bold and adventurous, but you want to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. Another very simple thing I did as far as equipment that I think really worked out well was I got a couple of those heavy-duty shopping bags, you know, the old type that are very thick. But any kind of heavy plastic bag or even a dry bag, have two of them. So when you get in your tent at night, dry stuff in your tent, just don't have it laying around, because it'll, you know, water splash, water soak up through the bottom of the tent, torrential rain that just drowns everything. You want those dry clothes dry. So I put my puffy in there, my wind jacket, maybe the extra clothing of any kind I had went in there. And then I had a second one that was all for wet clothing. So when I got in, you know, walked in the rain all day, then the shorts and the socks and everything would go in there, and that would keep them from getting anything else wet. And then when I put those wet clothes back on to hike, many times the rain fly would be wet, really wet. So I'd use that bag to separate my rain fly from the rest of the tent and the rest of my stuff. And then when I got a chance to dry it out, I could pull it out separate. So that worked out really well. The other piece of advice I want to give, because I learned this from trying multiple long trails, is a lot of us are competitive. We want to feel like we're doing well. We want to feel like we're a strong hiker, and sometimes that causes us to push ourselves to the point where we lose too much weight, keep going, we're tired, and therefore get injured, make mistakes, try to get through things like rivers that are up from rain that we really shouldn't try. So my advice is, understand that this is something that you're doing for self-improvement, pleasant experience, adventure. It's not something you're doing to hurt yourself or to get in a situation you have to recover from. So one of the things I tried to do is, if I started getting tired, The best way to know is when you start tripping over stuff, you just don't seem to be as nimble as you should be. It's time to either rest or stop. Make sure you do that. And then one day in 4, at least, maybe more frequently, have a shorter hiking day. Do 10 or 12 miles. Go to camp early. Get a rest day in. Go to bed early. Sometimes you'll be surprised how tired you are. Sometimes you'll sleep 10 or 12 hours if you give yourself the opportunity. And that's very important for maintaining your health and the energy you need to complete the hike and do it safely. So take care of yourself. Take some short days and rest. Another thing that's going to happen on trails, you're going to have bad days. And whether it's way too hot or way too rainy or occasionally way too cold, like in the Smokies for me. You just got to figure out how to handle them. You will be affected sometimes by multiple factors, but just agree with yourself that you're gonna have a good night's sleep and see how it feels in the morning, because things are always different after you rest a bit. If it's really getting to you, stop early. Get some food, get some water, get some rest. Try to connect with family or friends. Try to think about things or experience things that make you happy. But you will pull out of it most of the time. If you're at all resilient, the weather's going to change, situation's going to change, things are going to dry out eventually. Just keep plugging, and you go from 3 days of solid rain or a mouse chewing through your tent and crawling over you in the middle of the night to beautiful views on Mount Washington. Or there will be highs and lows, just like life. And just hang in there and take care of yourself, and most of it will pass.